Welcome to Unsolved Murders Essay, a true crime podcast based on investigations that, at the time of producing this episode, were still open. The views, information, or opinions expressed in this series are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Swisher Post, its parent company, and its partners. Some of the content featured in this series describes details of extreme violence. Therefore, viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Before we get into this episode, we'd like to thank you in advance for subscribing to our podcast. Every like, comment, and subscription goes a long way in helping us grow our Unsolved Murders essay community. If you are a new listener, then please do us a favor and subscribe to our podcast. The audio version of Unsolved Murders essay is available on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. We also upload video versions of these episodes on YouTube. Simply search Unsolved Murders Essay, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay abreast with every upload. We are a self-funded media startup, so if you enjoy our content, buying us a cup of coffee is one way to help us grow. Thank you in advance for your support.
Fatima Patel was a 28-year-old mother of 3 children from Laudium, Pretoria. She and her 2 sisters, Shakira Chinara and Rubina Good, were raised by their mother, Feroza Chinara. Growing up, Fatima was very ambitious. She had a fine taste for luxury, and while her upbringing was relatively humbling, she always pursued her dream of owning a home with a big enough yard to fit a stable for her white Arabian horse named Chai and a playground for her children. Fatima manifested her dreams, and between 2006 and 2007, she met the love of her life and the man who would become the prime suspect in her murder, Rameez Patel. Rameez is the son of mother Mahajeen Patel. It's unclear where Rameez originates from, but according to our research, he spent a majority of his life growing up in Nirvana, a middle-class suburb situated in Polokwane, Limpopo. Rameez was a successful entrepreneur with a number of wholesale stores in Polokwane. He met Fatima through a mutual friend, and a year into their relationship, the couple married in what was an intimate wedding. The newlyweds settled in Polokwane, and while Rameez soared in his entrepreneurship ventures, Fatima enjoyed a peaceful life as a stay-at-home wife. Fatima gave birth to 3 children who, on the day she was killed, were aged 8, 4, and 4 months old. As a stay-at-home mother, she took pride in the healthy upbringing she and Rameez afforded the children. Friends and relatives of the couple believed at the time that their marriage was strengthened by the true love they displayed for each other. Rameez treated Fatima with the utmost respect. He bought her every designer handbag and shoes she wanted and, on occasion, funded her international escapades. Rubina vouched for her sister's love for Rameez in a 2015 interview with You magazine, where she said, open quote, "She loved everything about him. The way he treated her, the way he was with her. He swept her off her feet." Close quote. The children seemed to be growing up in a happy home as well, and by all accounts, they adored their mother. From the outside looking in, Fatima and Rameez were a dream couple. The family has always indicated that in their interactions and encounters with Rameez, they never saw any red flags. He always attended family gatherings with Fatima and never displayed signs of violence, at least not around Fatima's family. Reflecting on this in the same interview, Rubina said, open quote, "Rameez was always willing to be with us as a family and never had any issues. Of course, like every couple, they had ups and downs. A marriage, after all, isn't a marriage if you don't have a bit of a tiff. But no one ever thought something like this would come of it." Close quote. What would later be used in court as part of the state's argument in support of Rameez's propensity for violence was that in his spare time he was a cage fighter. Cage fighting, or mixed martial arts, is a full contact sport which takes place inside a cage or similarly enclosed arena. To make the argument for how violent the sport is, since April 2019, There have been 7 recorded deaths resulting from sanctioned cage fights and an additional 9 from unregulated bouts. In a conversation between former UFC fighter Danny Downs and renowned sport columnist Ben Fowler-Keys, a question was asked: does MMA create violent people? Fowler-Keys' input as a former MMA fighter turned columnist was very interesting and could hold crucial perspectives on how Rameez's character ought to be observed. Responding to the question, Fowler-Keys said, open quote, "Think about what makes someone, in our view, a violent person. It's usually not how skilled they are in the application of violence, but how quickly they reach for it as a solution to every problem. I can't say it's not possible that all this MMA training only prepares people to think of a violent response as the appropriate one in every situation, but that seems way more like a defect of character than something you learn in the gym." Close quote. Did Rameez have anything to do with the murder of his wife? What exactly transpired inside the Nirvana house on that fateful day? And perhaps, more importantly, did Fatima die at the hands of a burglar, or was it Rameez who, in a fit of rage, obliterated his wife? Much of these questions will be the anchor in our assessment of the murder and subsequent investigation. Fatima suffered an unimaginably violent death on the 10th of April 2015. She was only 28 years old. Police were called out to the house where Fatima resided with Rameez and their 3 children after neighbours heard screaming and what sounded like a gunshot. One of the first people to enter the house was Gawi van Botha, a security patrol officer. Testifying at the murder trial in 2016, Botha told the court that when he entered the house, he found Fatima bleeding in her husband's arms. Describing Rameez's demeanor, he said, open quote, "He was calm. He did not go crazy. He was just sitting, holding her." Close quote. Rameez was drenched in his wife's blood, and from his observations, Botha believed Fatima was still bleeding profusely, possibly clinging on to what was left of her life. Botha was instructed by Rameez to go upstairs and check if the intruder who supposedly killed his wife was still in the townhouse. Botha made a thorough inspection of the property and determined that if an intruder had been in the house, he was long gone. Except something was amiss. Botha told the court that he found no signs of forced entry, and as far as he could tell, no windows were broken in the house. He added, open quote, "The whole kitchen was full of blood, from the sink. The curtain rail was on the floor with blood. On the fridge door, there was a bullet inside." Close quote. Fatima's body was bagged and transported to a forensic pathology center in Polokwane, where Dr. Arnold Mamashela performed the autopsy. In his report, Dr. Mamashela revealed that a bullet discharged from a 9.8mm firearm struck Fatima on the right cheek, just above her lip, and exited the back of her head. The gunshot wound caused bleeding in her ears, her eyes, and mouth. Fatima's hyoid bone, a U-shaped bone in the neck which supports the tongue, was also crushed, meaning before the shooting, she was choked. Moreover, Dr. Mamashela also observed that the victim's jaw had been dislocated and her cheekbones were shattered as a result of blunt force trauma. This injury, it came to be found, was caused by a baseball bat she was struck with during the ordeal. When questioned, Rameez claimed he arrived home on that day and found his wife lying in a pool of blood. Police were told Fatima was killed by an armed man in what turned out to be a botched robbery. Captain Mohlaka Mashiane from the Westernburg Police District also testified at the trial. He revealed that immediately Rameez was treated as the prime suspect in his wife's murder. Mashiane told the court that during interrogations, Rameez could not provide a solid alibi on his whereabouts the day his wife was killed. He only told police that he was outside, within close proximity to the house, and ran to check on his wife when he heard the gunshot. Interestingly, however, and what continues to baffle police is, immediately after Fatima was killed, Rameez got out of his bloody clothes, took a bath, and changed into a new outfit. Reflecting on this bizarre behavior, Mashiane said, open quote, "Immediately after the shooting of his wife, he took a bath. That's something abnormal. You find your wife in a pool of blood, and instead of calling the paramedics and the police, you take a bath? We find that amazing." Close quote. Bizarrely, soon after stumbling on his wife's body, Rameez traveled to his uncle's house and took a bath, effectively washing away the blood and all trace evidence. He left the clothes he wore behind at his uncle's place, and according to Mashiane, he changed outfits on at least 3 occasions that day. Police were sure they had the person responsible for killing Fatima. The victim had defensive scratch marks on her face. Coincidentally, Rameez too had similar scratch marks on his neck. He could never explain how the marks came about. 6 days later, on 16 April 2015, Rameez was officially charged with the murder of Fatima. Following a series of postponements in his court appearances, Rameez was released on 250,000 rand bail and was ordered to report to the police station 3 times a day. At the time of his arrest, Fatima's family could not bear the thought of Rameez being responsible for his wife's brutal killing. However, when the details of his questionable story started crumbling in court, the family became convinced that he was the culprit behind the daughter's vicious death. Farouk Chunara, the uncle of Fatima, reflected on the last time he saw his niece in an interview with City Press in May 2015. It was during the Easter weekend, and in conversation with Fatima, he had asked her if she was happy, and she agreed. Reflecting on the conversation, he said, open quote, "I somehow sensed that she was not telling the truth because her eyes told a different story. She promised to visit me on Wednesday, and I was hoping to have a talk with her in the hope that she would open up." Close quote. That Wednesday came and went without Fatima returning as promised. Farouk at the time figured she had returned to Polokwane. In part, he was right. However, before heading back to Nirvana, Fatima made a pit stop in Centurion to spend time with her sister Rubina. Rubina, during her interview with You magazine, had revealed that Fatima arrived at her home with her children that fateful week. It was the school holidays, and the kids were enjoying a fun time with family. Fatima was supposed to stay longer, but according to Rubina, she cut her holiday short by a day since she wanted to surprise Rameez by returning home early. She believed Rameez would be ecstatic to see her, and anyway, his mother-in-law, Mahajeen, needed help packing for an international trip. Feroza was still in contact with her daughter at the time, and she revealed in the same interview with You magazine that Fatima had asked her to come along to Polokwane. Unfortunately, in a decision that still haunts her to this day, Feroza declined the invitation, stating that she had to attend a wedding that weekend. Reflecting on her last encounter with her daughter, Feroza said, open quote, "My last conversation with her was that Thursday she left. Sometimes I feel if maybe I went with her, it wouldn't have happened. If maybe we left with her on Friday, she would not be gone." Close quote. Fatima left Rubina's residence on the morning of Friday, 10 April 2015, and made the 288-kilometer trip to Polokwane. Hours later, In the afternoon on that same day, Shakira received a gut-wrenching phone call from Rameez's cousin breaking the tragic news. When Rubina called Rameez in an attempt to understand what had happened, his uncle answered and said there had been a break-in and Fatima was killed by a burglar. While this claim never sat well with Fatima's family, they were not prepared for the shocking revelations that came during the trial. Initially, the trial was scheduled to start on 15 February 2016, but the state at the time had asked for a postponement due to the mysterious disappearance of two crucial witnesses. The witnesses, two Zimbabwean nationals who worked for Patel, managed to escape from the witness protection program only days before the commencement of the trial. This forced the court to postpone the trial to the 1st of August 2016. It would be the first of many postponements to hamper the trial, which has yet to take off in 2022. Fatima's family was one of the first set of witnesses the state called up to testify against Rameez when the trial first commenced in August 2016. According to Feroza, shortly after the birth of her third child in December 2014, Fatima had paid her a visit and revealed during a conversation that all was not well in her marriage. Contrary to the visage displayed by Rameez, things were falling apart at home. Feroza told the court that her daughter had been informed by Rameez that he wanted to end things. Shakira Chinara also testified against her brother-in-law. She told the court that Rameez owned a firearm and he always carried it whenever he was on patrol as a member of Nirvana's neighborhood watch. He usually carried it in a brown bag, but when investigators searched his premises for the weapon that killed Fatima, the gun was never found. Shakira also told the court that in her encounters with Rameez after the murder, she noticed he had scratch marks on his neck, a sighting corroborated by police and Fatima's uncle Farouk, who also testified at the trial. According to Farouk, his suspicions grew when he noticed a change in Rameez's behavior. He was never one to wear jackets, but coincidentally, after Fatima's murder, he was rarely seen with his arms bare. Remember, as we detailed in part 1 of the story, which we highly recommend you go listen to before you carry on further with this episode, Fatima had defensive wounds on her face, neck, and arms. This would indicate that she had fought for her life and possibly left scratch marks on the murderer. Proceedings were delayed in October 2016, and when they resumed in that same month, the court heard testimony from a domestic worker, Sarah Malachi, who worked at a neighbor's house. Sarah recalled that on that fateful day, she had heard a gunshot, followed by a woman's blood-curdling scream coming from the Patel home. Shortly before that, she had observed the couple's eldest son getting into a white car and another silver-grey car speeding out of the complex. As it would later be revealed in court, at least one of the cars was occupied by Danford Gundiza, who just so happened to be one of the two key state witnesses that had escaped the witness protection program. According to Gundiza, he was outside the house on the day of the murder and had heard Fatima telling Rameez to return with boxes from the shop. Things were heated between the couple, and Gundiza remembered hearing Fatima scream, open quote, "Tell me the truth. Why are you lying?" Close quote. At around 2 p.m., Rameez called Gundiza to the car, saying they had to go to the shop. On the way, Rameez picked up a friend and drove back home. Gundiza told the court that all he remembers is that he was told to stay in the car while Rameez and the friend went into the house. 4 days after Fatima's death, Gundiza recalled Fatima's scream and asked Rameez why his wife needed boxes. His response was that she wanted to move out of the house. This remark became the center of the state's argument on the motive behind the brutal murder. Before we get into that, another witness testimony is worth mentioning. Sibongile Ngwenya was employed by the Patels as a domestic worker. Sibongile Ngwenya was employed as the Patels' domestic worker. Ngwenya was the other key witness who, along with Gundiza, had escaped the witness protection program for reasons associated with remuneration and living conditions under police watch. When she finally did take the stand, Ngwenya revealed that while she was not present at the time Fatima was murdered, she and the children were transported away from the home by Rameez's brother, Razin, hours earlier, who took them to his workplace. This could have been the other vehicle Sarah, the neighbor's domestic worker, saw Fatima's eldest son getting into shortly before the gunshot and screams rang off. Ngwenya told the court that she returned to the property with Rameez later that day. When she went into the house, she saw pools of blood in the kitchen, and that's when she alerted Rameez, who saw Fatima's body and started screaming. Bizarrely, however, instead of contacting police, Rameez made sure Ngwenya did not enter the house. Following the discovery, Ngwenya and Rameez went to his parents' house. There, Ngwenya recalled, she was visited by a man who identified himself as a policeman. The two exchanged words briefly, and when the man had left, Rameez's mother, Mahajibeen Banu Patel, probed her about what she had told the policeman. The mother warned Ngwenya about talking herself into trouble. The following day, an unidentified driver picked up Ngwenya and they drove to a business parking lot. They were there to meet another individual, a man who identified himself as her lawyer. The lawyer probed Ngwenya about what she knew about the murder of Fatima. Bizarrely, the lawyer warned Ngwenya that someone was looking for her, and when asked by police who her legal representation was, she ought to mention him and indicate that she was referred to him by a friend. Ngwenya, however, never accepted the man's legal aid. The Patel domestic worker also strengthened the case with two crucial pieces of evidence: a gun owned by Rameez that Shakira had already confirmed exists, and a letter written by Fatima where she had detailed the true nature of her marriage. Fatima was of the belief that Rameez's parents were not fond of her. This could explain why she went the extra mile and cut her family holiday short to help Mahajibeen pack for her international trip. The letter also lent credence to the possible motive behind Fatima's murder. Rameez, as it turns out, was involved in an extramarital relationship with a woman named Nazreen Mayet. Abdul Nazim, who is Nazreen's ex-husband, was brought into court to clarify certain details of the affair. He told the Polokwane High Court that the first time he became aware of the lusty affair between Nazreen and Rameez was in August 2014. The lovers had met at the school their children attended and sparked a heated romance. Despite his best efforts, Abdul could do nothing to stop Nazreen from making every effort possible to see and spend time with Rameez. In October 2014, he invited Rameez and Fatima to a restaurant where he, in the presence of his ex-wife, advised the lovers to end the affair. Rameez agreed to stop seeing Nazreen, but of course, this was never the case. On the 2nd of September 2014, Rameez and Nazreen approached their respective partners separately to ask for an end to their marriage. By January 2015, Nazreen had successfully divorced Abdul, but Rameez was still living with his wife and children. Rameez assisted Nazreen with moving out of her place in Bendour village and into a house he rented for her in Saisad estate. Questions remain unanswered about what Fatima may have stumbled upon when she returned from her Gauteng trip unannounced that Thursday evening. Investigating officer Muhammad Wahab, who read the sworn statements submitted by Ngwenya and Kundiza in court, revealed that Rameez had spent time with Nazreen at least 2 nights before Fatima's murder. Abdul also admitted that on several occasions after the divorce was finalized in January 2015, he would bump into the lovers at various locations. Ngwenya had informed police that she heard Rameez reveal to at least 4 of his friends that he had done away with Fatima. It was at Mahajibeen's residence that she had heard this. Guenya wrote in her sworn statement that she was at the corridor leading from the lounge when she specifically heard Rameez describe to his friends how he had struck Fatima repeatedly with a cricket bat to silence her. When she fell to the ground, Guenya recalls Rameez admitting he'd strangled her. Before he could reveal any more information, Rameez and his friends were alerted to Guenya's presence, and immediately he paused and said, open quote, "Game's over. We'll tell you tomorrow what happened." Close quote. State pathologist Dr. Arnold Mamashela informed the court that Fatima's chances of survival were minimal due to the brutality of the attack. Her face was battered by a blunt object. Her throat bone was completely crushed and she was shot in the head. At first, Razin had defended his brother in court and corroborated much of his defense. When he first took the stand in October 2016, Razin had strengthened the burglary story with the claim that Fatima's handbag was nowhere to be found. He had also indicated that around the time of the murder, the residential complex's electric fence was offline, making it possible for an intruder to enter and exit without harm. Razin's stance would change in October 2018, but hours before testifying against his brother, he was shot 4 times. Miraculously, Razin survived the attack, and immediately thereafter, he fled to the United Kingdom, citing fears of his safety as the reason. Assisted by the state, Razin returned to South Africa in November of that year, where he took the stand and told the court Rameez had handed him a box containing blood-stained clothing and a firearm. Razin said he was instructed to hide the box at a warehouse and await further instructions. Shortly after Rameez was arrested, Nazreen contacted Razin and collected the box. Razin, apparently afraid for his life, informed his parents about what Rameez had done. Bizarrely, both of the brothers' parents would die under suspicious circumstances shortly thereafter. Now, to make sense of the events we will discuss in this episode, we have to weave the stories involving Rameez's mother, father, and father-in-law into the timeline of the Fatima Patel murder trial. While he was out on 250,000 Rand bail, on Friday, 12 August 2016, Rameez's father, Feroz, was gunned down on Platinum Street in Polokwane. A police report that came out at the time revealed that Feroz, who was 54, was driving around Polokwane when he realized that he was being pursued by 2 vehicles. Under pressure and understandably afraid for his life, Feroz lost control of his vehicle and crashed into a brick wall. 4 armed men approached Feroz's car and emptied their cartridges on the 54-year-old, killing him instantly. It is said that a bag with unknown contents was removed from the car, leading authorities to conclude that Feroz may have been a victim of an armed robbery. Friends and relatives of the Patel family have long believed, however, that Feroz's death was no coincidence and that in one way or the other, Rameez could have had something to do with it. Those with intimate knowledge of the family's happenings behind closed doors suggest that Rameez was on the verge of being booted from the family by its patriarch, following the embarrassment that was brought about by the murder of Fatima. A source close to the family spoke anonymously to the Sunday Times in 2018 about Feroz, describing him as the king of the throne in Limpopo's retail industry. Open quote. He worked hard for his family and sons. The sons ran a shop in town and the father ran a number of other businesses here in Polokwane, Giani and Tohoyandu. Close quote, he said. Another anonymous figure with intimate knowledge of the family's ongoings told told the publication that Rameez had inherited ownership of wholesale outlets from his father, and when he was arrested for killing his wife, Feroz had isolated him from the Patel family. Open quote. That was an embarrassment to the family, and his father tried to talk some sense into him. I understand that he later lost a number of privileges and he was on the verge of losing his share in the family business as well, close quote, the source said. Bizarrely, Feroz, a man revered in his community as a leader, suffered a violent death and questions remain unanswered about who was responsible. Rameez, who was never formally charged with his father's death, continued on with his pursuit of acquittal in the case of his wife. A year went by with no progress in the Fatima Patel murder trial. Rameez's defense locked heads with the state, making appeals that halted proceedings for months on end. Then, on Tuesday, 19 September 2018, tragedy struck once again in the Patel family. This time, the matriarch, Mahajeen Banu Patel, had been targeted in a home invasion. According to police at the time, Mahajeen was with her domestic worker, Sara Malaji. You will remember her from part 2. At approximately 7 p.m., when an armed gunman entered her house in Nirvana and unleashed a hail of bullets. Mahajeen clung on to life but was pronounced dead in hospital a few hours later. Miraculously, Sarah had not been struck by the gunfire, and coincidentally, no valuable items were taken during the invasion. This led investigators to believe that, in all likelihood, the person behind the murder of Mahajeen was after one thing and one thing only: her life. Colonel Mowaje Nkgope, Limpopo's police spokesperson, surfaced 2 weeks later announcing that Rameez, who was fighting to clear his name in his wife's case, was formally charged with the murder of his mother. Open quote. Through our dedicated teams of the Westernburg detectives, the deceased son was positively linked to this murder, which led to his arrest. The motive behind the killing is still not clear, as nothing was taken from the deceased's house, close quote, Nkgope said at the time. The motive would be the missing puzzle that exonerated Rameez from prosecution in his mother's case. According to Rameez's close friends, who have stuck by his side since the death of his wife, the businessman absolutely adored his mother and would not have sanctioned the violent attack that befell the 51-year-old. One of his friends, who spoke anonymously to the Post in 2017, stressed that Rameez was a man with many enemies who would have done anything to do away with him. Adding further context, the source said, open quote, he would never do such a heinous crime. His mother was his life. She looked after his kids when they lost their mom. She was their support system. Even though she lost her husband, she stayed strong for her grandkids. Close quote. During bail hearings for Mahajeen's murder, however, allegations emerged that the mother had allegedly warned relatives and close friends that she feared Rameez would kill her one day. This was further corroborated by figures close to the family who spoke to the media in anonymity. The rumor mill in Nirvana, perpetuated by Patel relatives who have since fled the country, suggested that Rameez had killed his parents as a result of being ostracized from the family's wealth following his involvement, whether directly or indirectly, in the Fatima Patel murder. Relatives of Rameez moved out of South Africa and sold the wholesale chain inherited from the deaths of Feroz and Mahajeen. Open quote. When his father and mother died, he was to get all the shops and wealth that the father has worked hard for. If he could walk out of jail, he was going to get all the businesses. relatives now had to sell the shops. Close quote, sources claimed. The state fought for Rameez to be held in custody for allegedly killing his mother. During a bail hearing on Thursday, 12 October 2017, the state played an audio recording of a conversation between Nazarene Mayet, Rameez's second wife, the same woman he was involved with while married to Fatima, and her ex-husband Abdul Nazim. In it, Nazarene was heard describing Rameez as an abusive psychopath who hired hitmen to do away with people who brought about problems in his life. The court also heard Nazarene tell Abdul that she was afraid of leaving Rameez as he had threatened on multiple occasions to kidnap her children. Nazarene, in the audio recording, also informed her ex-husband that in June 2017, Rameez had categorically told her that he, open quote, wanted to put his mother away, close quote. Coincidentally, that is exactly what happened to Mahajeen 4 months later. Nazarene would shockingly deny all these claims under cross-examination, claiming that she was under duress at the time of the conversation. In a bizarre twist, Rameez's second wife went from admitting that she feared her husband would kill her if he had found the recorded conversation, to accusing her ex-husband of blackmailing her into participating in the audio recording. The defense piggybacked on this shift in momentum and introduced the younger brother, Razin, as the main culprit with enough probable cause to kill his mother. Rameez argued that Razin had physically abused his mother on multiple occasions in the past. This was corroborated by records of domestic violence reports made by Mahajeen against Razin. This aspect of the investigation was never pursued by investigators, since they had every reason to believe that Rameez had committed the murder. And the defense chastised the state for this. Rameez's lawyers stressed that no other leads were ever pursued in the case, and that the businessman who was on trial for killing his wife was used as a scapegoat for police inefficiency in the murder of his mother. Sarah Malaki, the only credible witness who was in the house the evening Mahajeen was murdered, refused to step forward to testify for the state. She, like many others, have cited fears of being killed as the reason behind their refusal to cooperate with the investigation. With no witnesses willing to come forward and a shaky case docket, the Polokwane High Court dismissed the Mahajeen murder charge and ordered the release of Rameez. The case is still open, with Rameez still considered a prime suspect. Mystery would not surround Rameez for another year. Then, on Saturday, 8 September 2018, Nazareen's father, Yunus Mayet, was targeted in an ambush. According to a police report released at the time, Yunus and his family had been at a local shopping mall all day that fateful Saturday. The family returned home in Sturpak at approximately 11 p.m. when three men parked in a black Volkswagen Golf unleashed a hail of gunfire targeted at the family. The gunfire, it was later determined, was used as a fear tactic to stun the family, while the unidentified men grabbed and shoved Yunus in the trunk of the car. Police also reported that the gunmen took the family's watches, cell phone, and cash before they left with Yunus. The Mayet patriarch would suffer a horrific death. His bullet-riddled body was discovered almost 10 kilometers away, near the Polokwane airport on Silicon Road. He was shot 7 times, with at least 2 bullets striking his head. Police revealed that the suspects had destroyed the cell phones and dumped them in several locations, perhaps on their way to execute Yunus. Nazareen's father had, before his murder, been assisting Rameez with running his businesses while he was in jail. Sources close to the Mayet family spoke in anonymity with the Sunday Times in 2018 and made startling claims about Yunus's murder case. The source, who was described as a person working closely with the Mayets, revealed that Yunus did not approve of Rameez's arranged marriage with his daughter Nazreen. According to the source, Yunus had tolerated the relationship for his daughter's sake, but in truth, he was never fond of Rameez. Open quote. The fight Rameez and Fatima had on the day of her death was because of this suspected relationship Rameez had with Nazreen. Her father did not approve of this relationship at all, close quote, the source said. Rameez was never linked to the murder, and to this day, the kidnapping and subsequent murder of Yunus remains unsolved. Several postponements continued to scupper progress in the Fatima Patel trial. Proceedings took off once again between October 2020 and April 2021, where Rameez was placed under cross-examination. He was questioned about his whereabouts on the day of the murder, about his reluctance to hand over evidence and his brother's allegations, all to which he would plainly respond, open quote, "I don't recall," close quote. The cross-examination was cut short after Polokwane High Court Judge Joseph Raulinga had to question 3 registrars who had not transcribed court recordings 2 years after he had made the ruling. The judge also had to investigate how his notes had been tampered with and how a court statement had suspiciously gone missing. The trial was postponed to July 2021 to allow registrars time to transcribe court recordings and make submissions by the 31st of April 2021. Rameez's cross-examination continued in July, and the court heard for the first time about an audio recording he supposedly had in his possession where his younger brother, Razin, claimed he was coerced by the police to implicate him in Fatima's murder. This, of course, was new information to the state, who had never received a copy of the recording. Rameez also claimed that Razin and his wife were back in South Africa living with him, and despite rumors of tensions, things were pretty cordial between them. Rameez was also questioned about certain inconsistencies in his versions of events on what had happened on the afternoon Fatima was murdered. It was revealed in court that, at the time of the murder, there had been construction work done in the complex they resided in, and according to experts, it would have not only been impossible for an intruder to slip in and out of the house unnoticed, but that they would have had to overcome many obstructions on their path. Rameez, in response, suggested that maybe one of the construction workers could have committed the murder. He also vehemently denied ever changing his outfits multiple times after he found Fatima's body. Riots that had broken out in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal at the time caused further delays in the trial. Despite numerous efforts from Rameez to have the case thrown out of court, the state forged ahead, and in January 2022, a decision was reached by the Polokwane High Court to host the last phase of the trial in April. The trial was expected to commence in the first week of January, but Rameez contracted COVID-19 and was forced into isolation. The murder trial will commence on the 4th of April 2022. Rameez Patel has not been charged for the murders of his mother, Mahajeen, his father, Faroz, and his father-in-law, Yunus. Rameez has also been implicated in 2 other murders that he was never charged for. One involved a teenage boy who broke into his home, and another, an Ethiopian man. But he was never tried, because one of the cases was withdrawn and the other was treated as mob justice. If you are listening to this episode and happen to have information that could help investigators, please contact SAPS's toll-free Crime Stop number at 08600 10 111.
This brings us to the end of our episode. If you enjoyed our podcast, please consider giving us a star rating. We appreciate all the feedback and it helps us improve the quality of our podcast.